Excellent. All right, so as Margie mentioned, my name is James Sullivan, and I'll be joined by my colleague, Calvin Kwan. Today we're going to be presenting on enterprise sites and Hub. Before we move into the meat of the presentation, I want to show you some recent examples. So during these unprecedented times, the need to share data in a geospatial context is more important than ever. And the people who typically need that information, first responders, medical staff, decision makers, aren't always classically trained geospatial analysts. So pointing them to your portal to discover content like you would someone in your GIS shop simply isn't going to cut it. That's why Esri has made use of our ArcGIS Hub technology to create a single repository for discovering maps, data sets, and applications related to COVID-19 that anyone can easily navigate. Right at the top of the page, there's an easy button to request GIS access, or a user can scroll down to discover authoritative web applications like the Johns Hopkins dashboard that I'm sure many of you have seen either in the news or online. You can also continue down to view an embedded application, such as this one from the Institute for Health Metrics, to view predictions on when peak hospital usage will be, or if it's already occurred. For example, like with Virginia, where I'm currently presenting from, which was 4 days ago. Continuing down the site, there's also recommendations from health experts, including this 5-step plan for understanding the potential impact COVID-19 could have on your community. The Census Bureau is also leveraging ArcGIS Hub to share out important information relevant to their mission area around demographics. At the top of the site, they've exposed some live summary statistics being fed from various sources, in addition to a state and county level COVID-19 impact reports. So I could use this to filter down to see how my area is going to be affected in Virginia, and then specifically in Loudoun County. And I can view those impact reports directly within the embedded application for both the state and the county. Then on the site, there's also additional applications and highlighted data sets to empower the public to conduct their own analysis, which I can select from the categorical search or browse the underlying open data site to find the exact information that I need. Finally, local governments are also taking advantage of ArcGIS Hub's capabilities to provide more specialized information specific to their constituents. For example, this site from Delaware County, Indiana, leverages a multi-page layout to provide general information on the home page, and then other focus pages containing important information on food resources, business and employment information, as well as neighborhood level resources to encourage community members and support them in getting organized to find ways to help one another. All right, so those are just a few recent examples of how the technology is being used. And over the course of the next hour, we're going to help you understand how users got up and running to get to that level. So we're going to start with a high-level introduction of both Hub and enterprise sites. Going to cover some of the basics, talk about some considerations for planning and building your first site. That's going to be mainly with leveraging the enterprise sites technology. Then we're going to show how using ArcGIS Hub, you can launch an engagement platform to truly engage with your community. And then we'll wrap up with some tips and tricks, and lastly, some resources. All right, so starting with some definitions up front, ArcGIS Enterprise Sites is a capability that allows you to create customized websites and web pages to feature content from your portal to non-GIS users. So think of the portal as your GIS home base, and you're embedding that functionality in different places on the web that might interest non-GIS users in the spaces they're used to finding information, such as a wiki or other internal shared site. Next, ArcGIS Hub is an easy to configure cloud platform for organizations to collaborate within their communities to accomplish information-driven initiatives. So this is similar to enterprise sites, but the difference here is that we're using ArcGIS Online as our WebGIS. And the key word here with this definition is community. So most people in our communities are not geospatial experts, so we need to find a way to engage with them and share that content in a way that they're going to find meaningful. Both applications use the same underlying technology, so we'll be talking about them somewhat interchangeably throughout this presentation, but we'll still try to be clear about specifying the functionality and capabilities that you have access to with each. All right, so here's another graphic to help break that down a little bit more. Starting with ArcGIS Hub, it's a component of ArcGIS Online, and it comes in two different offerings with Hub Basic and ArcGIS Hub Premium. We'll focus mainly on the functionality available in Hub Basic, but towards the end of this presentation, we'll be sure to highlight some areas where if you license that Hub Premium functionality, you'll get access to extra features, layout options, and have the ability to do some true two-way engagement with people outside of your organization. Similarly, ArcGIS Enterprise Sites is a component of your enterprise portal that is included with the ArcGIS Enterprise product from version 10.6.1 and beyond, and that's just there naturally. There's no need to for a separate install or to lay down any additional software. And this allows you to create sites and pages amongst other things. All right, so one of the most common questions that we get asked is, when should I use which product? Long story short, if you're using ArcGIS Online as your underlying WebGIS and you have access to the open internet, then you should be using ArcGIS Hub. It's going to have more features and functionality as we do more frequent releases to ArcGIS Online, as opposed to around 2 per year for ArcGIS Enterprise. And there's also no guarantee that everything from the latest online release will always make it into that next enterprise release. So this slide illustrates a lot of that in regards to functionality. But if that's not enough to convince you, some other reasons why you might want to use Hub is that Hub is optimized to run on the web with the content distribution network that we put behind it. And we take extra steps to ensure that your Google page ranking will be high for people to find that site. Finally, Hub supports 3 subsystems that Enterprise does not, such as multiple custom domains in the ArcGIS Online platform. So you could then run a mysite.org in addition to also having a different domain. Hub also has an extended download system and caching platform, so we can make more data formats available on top of your feature service and other data sources. Hub also has an improved search experience. All that being said, we understand that a lot of you may be operating on your own network that can't be online and you can't use a SaaS product. So that's where Enterprise Sites really shines, and you have the option to deploy it and have full control over the Enterprise portal, web adapters, server, and everything else that comes with that product. All right, so a couple quick examples of what people are using Hub and Sites for. One way to think about this is that people use Hub or Sites to build communication bridges. And that's between their existing outward-facing digital presence and their authoritative data. So when leveraged well, Hub fills the gap between a system that empowers you to inform, engage, and monitor your goals, including how your audience participates in that effort. These screenshots show how the city of Raleigh, North Carolina connected the dots. They built a bridge between their existing Raleigh government site and their authoritative data by using Hub to inform and engage with their community and monitor their goals as they did so. So now let's explore a live example with Washington, D.C. All right, so one great example of building bridges between an existing site and an organization's authoritative content is with Washington, D.C. For example, from the main dc.gov site, I can browse to find out more information about Mayor Muriel Bowser, and I can dig in to find out where she stands on certain key issues like the environment, which then launches me into the opendata.dc.gov hub site and a page specifically dedicated to sharing out statistics, charts, and applications, all powered by ArcGIS, providing more information on her key stances. Additionally, if I return to the main dc.gov site, I can scroll down to the bottom, and if I want to dive right in and discover more information around the data that DC is providing, this is another avenue for me to get into that opendata.dc.gov hub site And I want to point out here that they've chosen to tie in that experience leveraging a similar color scheme and branding, including the favicon icon that you see at the top of my tab. One more thing I want to point out is that they're bringing this full circle as far as informing, engaging, and monitoring their community by including a survey where they can ask community members for feedback on what additional data sets they'd like to see on the site. And just a note about the name, Open Data, GeoHub, or GeoPortal are all common ways that we've seen organizations describe their sites. All right, so one of the best ways to get familiar with a new piece of software is just to dive right in and start working with it. So that's what we're going to do here in a moment. But before we do that, I want to lay down just a couple of ground pieces of information to understand. So to get access to either Hub or Sites, you need to have a creator user type with essential apps, including the Hub or Sites app. And some of the specific privileges that are required are the ability to create content, create groups, share to a group. So these are essentially what's needed for a publisher. And then there's a few other privileges that are nice to have, such as the ability to create a group with update capabilities and to assign users to that group, which will just save you a little bit of time where you can kind of force someone into a group rather than inviting them and waiting for them to accept. How do you access the software? Whether you're using ArcGIS Online or using ArcGIS Enterprise, you're going to go to the application launcher and launch the Hub or Sites app respectively. And then if you're in ArcGIS Online, you also have another option using the Create menu to access the Sites application that way. Once you launch the app, you'll be greeted by the overview page, which is a great way to continue picking up previous projects that you've been working on, in addition to seeing what other sites exist across your organization. All right, so we're going to jump right in and build our first site. So here I'm at the main portal homepage for an instance of ArcGIS Enterprise 10.8 that we have stood up in AWS. And for this demonstration, I'll be showcasing the capabilities in enterprise sites. And then later on in the hour, Calvin will build off of this by using ArcGIS Online as his environment. So therefore, he'll be leveraging ArcGIS Hub. So as I showed on the site or on the slides, I can launch the Sites application directly from that app launcher. This takes me to that overview page where I can either or I can launch a new site. So we'll give it a name and go ahead and create that blank site. Now when this happens, it's going to leverage a default template that comes when you install Enterprise, which is where it's filling out some of the different images, text, and other sections that you see on this on the site that I just created. Also notice that the name that I just entered, demo, appears in my header. Now I want to point out that if I go back to the content section in my portal, when I created that site, a couple of items were automatically laid down within my enterprise. So first of all was the site application. So you can see by the timestamp that this was the one that I just created today, named demo, and also notice that it's delete protected to avoid me from accidentally removing this item and losing some of my work. And then additionally, when I created that site, a new group was created to manage some of the content that I'm going to want to share there called demo content, which is also delete protected. All right, so to customize my site, I've got a number of different options from this menu on the left, which we'll get into more detail on in the next demonstration. But in short, these provide me easy access to update or change my header, to adjust the theme or color scheme that's going to be applied throughout my site on multiple pages. And then lastly, to adjust the layout of my site. And this is likely where you're going to spend the bulk of your time when you're creating a new site or a new page. I've also got this menu at the top, and I can browse to my team. So because I just created this site, I'm currently the only member of my team. But because I have those additional admin privileges, I can add a new user to my team, for example, my colleague David, and then he can begin collaborating and assisting me with building out this site or building out additional pages. All right, behind every site is an open data site. And so this is where you can see what information is discoverable through the content library. Since we just set up the site, we need to go to the groups manager and add some additional content or groups that will be discoverable through the site. So currently the only group that's linked here to be searched is the demo content site that was just created as part of this, as part of the site, which is currently empty. So I could either go through and populate that group with content to be accessible via the site, or I can just search through and add additional groups that exist on my portal and make those searchable through the site. So now if I return to that content library, you'll see that I can browse the different data or apps and maps that are now available because I've added those groups to be discoverable through the site. All right, so when you think of the different menus you're working with, you can think of this site-specific menu as your local menu for getting around with everything containing to this specific site. So my team, my content library, my groups. Then this drop-down over here would be your global menu where I can go back and view that overview page or see other sites that exist within my portal and other projects that are going on. And then finally, on the right-hand side, there's some options around controlling who can view your site. So currently it's set to be just by the team, so myself and David at this point, but I could open it up to the organization or the larger public. The option to save, which is always useful, so you make sure that you don't lose any of your work as you're moving along in editing. The option to view the application live. So this is where I can see what this allows me to see what it'll look like outside of the editor view. And then finally, some additional options, such as the ability to delete my site, which I'm going to leverage now. And then what this will do is go through and delete all the different items that were laid down in my portal, such as that group. If I refresh, you'll see that demo content group go away, and the site application, so that way there's no orphaned items left on my portal when I'm done with that specific site. All right, so now that we have a feel for how the software works, it's time to start planning out how we want to build a site for real. So there's a saying in scuba diving, and that is to dive the plan, or to plan the dive and to dive the plan. So now that you're familiar with the application and some of its capabilities, this is a great time to have some open conversations with different stakeholders in your organization. So it's important to have these conversations up front for a number of different reasons. Firstly, the web is likely someone's domain in your organization, and it's an existing place that somebody owns that you want to be part of. So you need to make sure you're talking with them to figure out the best way to integrate. Another reason might be is that having these conversations up front is a great way to bring people to the table early. And then if you want to further integrate with other existing sites, it's much easier to do that if you've had those conversations early on rather than trying to think of that later on down the road. And lastly, you might even get some free advice or access to other resources in different parts of your organization simply by asking for them. So if you're at the stage where you believe you're ready to build, then the next step I recommend is doing a little bit of planning. And if you don't do any planning, then this is what you'll end up with. And that's a bunch of sites that are islands growing independently from one another with no clear means or path of navigating through them. Conversely, you probably want to build a site that looks something more like this, which is a well-organized city with a clear center and different districts, all connected by a clear network that allows you to logically chart a path from one region to another. So if you're interested in the island approach, then I have nothing more to offer you. But if you want to go down this road and build something that's more deliberately planned, then let's continue to see how that's done. So to start planning your site, there's two important questions you need to ask yourself. Firstly, do you want to build this site to fit into your existing organizational site? And if so, how? Now, this is actually a little bit of a trick question because even if you don't initially intend to do so, it will likely become a requirement as your site gains popularity and people in your organization demand a simpler means of accessing all the information that they need. So you can get ahead of this by planning to integrate from the beginning. And a good way to do this is to match the existing branding, which often on many pages means the header section of the page. The next question that you're going to want to ask is, do you need a root site, which we're going to explore more on the next slide. So let's play out an example of how a site could mature. Initially, you might have 3 sites with different requirements, different groups, and supporting different departments. So the first thing that you might want to do is use your portal homepage as a launching off point to connect these different sites. So structurally, that would look something like this, and you could even configure your featured maps and apps ribbon or your gallery to highlight your various sites. So here's an example of one way you can do that by placing links to those sites directly on the portal homepage, like you see with the 3 across the bottom here. This is great if people in your organization already have been trained to log into the portal to find geospatial content, but now you can make it even easier for the non-classically trained geospatial analysts to find the content directly from a focus site rather than hunting it down in multiple different places across your organization. So you could think of this as maturity level 1 when building out a site or having the minimum required 15 pieces of flair, but surely we can do a little bit better. So if you want to think of this as maturity level 2, rather than having 3 different sites, you would want to pick a common look and feel across all of them. And as I mentioned before, this often involves a common theme and header to align these sites and make the navigation experience a good one. But if you do need that monolithic experience where you have the site that has everything on it, then you can make a site as your launching off point instead of leveraging your portal homepage. And then you could have that link to other sub-sites with a similar look and feel, which is what we saw when we were viewing the DC site a little bit earlier on. This is getting pretty good, but I know you're probably asking yourself, can we do better? You don't just want to wear the 15 minimum pieces of flair, you want to go for the full 37. So here's how we do that. And that's by keeping in mind that with each of these sites, we always have access to pages within each site. So you can tie several sites together in this way and still have another level beyond that. This is how you could have different experiences for each project. As you dig into each, they might have their own specific site. All right, so now that you've planned out your site and you know how you want your visitors to navigate through it, we can get into the mechanics of actually building the site itself. So there's a lot of different sections to consider. The header, which is where you can tie into that existing theme or branding. Your rows, which you can think of as different chunks on your site that are going to hold most of your content that we call cards. And then lastly, the footer, which can hold some legalese or other related information that sits below the fold of your site. And the last piece I want to touch on here before we get into the demo is a quick note to mention that the underlying framework of Hub and Sites is that they're built on top of, or they're built using Bootstrap 3. And what this means for you is that the pages you build are going to be responsive as they leverage this grid of columns. And the different elements will stack according to how much screen real estate is available. So if you're viewing your site on your computer, tablet, or phone, it'll just work. You don't need to build a separate site for each. All right, so let's jump into a demo here on building out a more well-planned site. So I'll come back in and launch the application. And this time I'm going to start with a site that I previously started. You'll notice that similar template with those default images and text, but we're going to start changing those up a little bit. So the first thing I want to do is, because I'm building a site, you'll notice the name is Maritime Information, and I want to build this as a location for anybody in my organization to have a one-stop shop to find all maritime related data sets and apps. I'm going to update the image on the home page. So I can come in here and configure the image URL. And then I've got a few other options here if I want to apply transparency or change the focal point, which I want to do so I see more of the water rather than the ship. And then I also want to update my text. So we're going to give this a more appropriate name. And then I'll delete the sub-headline text because that's not something I want to include. Additionally, this text box here that came with the template doesn't work for me, so I can go ahead and get rid of that. All right, next, because I want to make it really easy for people to find Finnish applications that are on my portal relating to maritime information, I want to put those right up front directly under this opening banner. So I'll do that by adding in a new row. And then within that row, I can place the gallery card, which will hold different applications to browse through. So I can link that up to content on my portal. We've got a few different apps that were made using a service from a Esri partner company, Spire, which provides out an AIS ship service. So I can add that. And then I can also add in other applications across my site that I want to have featured here. All right, and as I add in this gallery card, I've got a few options for if I want to change the style. So if I want to use rounded corners instead of square, or apply a drop shadow. And additionally, if I want, when people click on each one of these, to have it open a new tab or the same tab. All right, so here's where I want to get into briefly that discussion on the responsive design. So if I shrink down my screen, you'll notice that the tiles have restacked. So now I've got 3 across the top and 1 on bottom. And if I shrink this down even more, you'll see that it keeps resizing. So if I was viewing this on my phone, tablet, or other screen size, my site's still going to work and it's still going to look good. I don't have to do any additional work for that functionality to take place. All right, so now I've got these apps in place. The next thing that I want to have is a separator before I get to my next chunk of content. So I'm going to add in another row and a text box. All right, and then in this text box, I'm going to apply a background image. And again, we'll change our focal point so we see more of the water. And then in my text box, Hub has a rich text editor. So I can go ahead and manually type directly in this text box the information that I want, such as, we'll change the size here, make it a little bigger. And then I could copy and paste in a subheading. All right, now you're probably noticing that it's a little tough to read some of this text right now, and that's because the color for the text is actually coming from the theme that I have for my site. These are the default colors, which I've chosen to leave because I feel like they fit nicely with my maritime theme. But unfortunately, this body text color of a kind of dark gray doesn't work well with my background image. So I could change it here, but that would then change the body text color for every other location in my site, which may not be what I want. So what I'm going to do is go ahead and just configure the text color for this row to be white. And you'll see that that text pops up, becomes much more visible. And I also have the option, if I want to pop into code view and edit the HTML directly. So if I want to change the color for that upper header to be yellow. I can go ahead and make that change as well. So Note that with Hub and Sites, it's a WYSIWYG, or what you see is what you get user interface. And you have the options to do as much or as little customization as you want. All right, so directly below this divider, I'm going to add in a new row. And here's where I want to highlight a specific embedded application. So I'll use an iframe. And that's a great way to throw a video, third-party app, or pretty much anything else into your site. So for this one, we're going to add a dashboard that's on my site that was created leveraging a service from another Esri partner, Hawkeye 360, which provides out a different layer for ship locations that they use radio frequency to determine those locations. All right, and then the final section that I want to add here is some brief summary statistics. So we'll add in a new row. And then I'm going to link this up from a layer within my portal. So to show you that real quick, we'll pop back into my portal into a web map. And I'm going to search for the specific layer that I'm looking for. So we've got a layer from that partner company, Spire. We can add the ship track layer to the map. And I just want to show you some of the attribution that I have to work with, which is going to be what powers that summary statistic card that I just added. So we'll let those draw on the map. We'll pop open the attribute table here. And you can see that right now it's picking up about 133,000 ships. And then I've got all these different attribute fields to work with. Note that each ship has a unique ID. So that's where it's pulling that, that feature number from. And then also we have this field here for flag, which tells us what flag the ship is flying under. In this case, we're concerned with how many US ships there are. So with that in mind, I can search my portal and find that layer. I can set the statistic field to look at that ID field. So knowing that they're all unique, that'll give me a count on how many ships I have. And then I have the option to refine this down even further. So if I want to apply a filter based on that flag field and only look for US ships, I can apply that right in the card, and that'll tell me that there's currently 7,000 ships being detected. And then I can add some descriptive text here, as well as some trailing text. All right, so then I can continue editing the site, removing cards from the, or rows from the template as I see fit. I'm gonna leave it there for now and save my work. The final piece I wanna get into is talking about multiple pages. So you can quickly add a new page to your site like this. And that's just gonna create a new page with a different template where I could continue to add new content and then link that into my site. I've already gone ahead and created a separate page around piracy information. And so now I just want to link this to my site, which I can set up in the header. And you'll see that pop up here. And the last piece I want to point out is that notice that my site is currently shared with my organization. Whereas if I come in and view that page, this page is only shared with my team. So I can see both because I'm a member of the team here. But if I come into a different browser, so here in Firefox, notice I'm logged in with a different user, so different username. Maybe I'm someone now that works in land ops, so I wouldn't have a need to work with maritime data. I can come in and view that site, and because this user is not a member of that team, I don't have permissions to view that piracy page, and in fact, I don't even see that it exists at all. So Sites is a great way to share out the right content with the right people in your organization, especially as a way of getting non-GIS staff excited about the products you're creating. With that, I'm going to go ahead and hand it over to Calvin, and he's going to pick it up talking about ArcGIS Hub.
All right, thank you, James. So now that James has showed us how to build and configure an internal-facing sites to share data and content, let's quickly explore how we can leverage premium capabilities in ArcGIS Hub to have a deeper connection and engagement with your community. But before we dive into the demo, I want to first start by encouraging you to think a little differently about your community. And one way to think about a community is to think about a process of communicating and soliciting feedback from the general public on a specific topic or a project. So it could be a new urban development project, reporting of safety issue, or even providing like feedback on internal services, like IT services, for example. And you could accomplish all of this by having a survey embedded in your public hub page. That's all well and good, but let's think bigger and imagine what we could do if we are able to give members of the public their own identities. So with an identity, the general public becomes an active participant in your content by being able to follow your initiative and sign up for events. We can even message them directly from ArcGIS Hub to communicate with these users. But perhaps we could take this engagement a step further. We can now begin to think about recruiting the super engaged users, the users who follow the initiative and participate in a bunch of events, to become active volunteers to assist in your initiative and projects important to your organization. And going even more deeply, what if we could include members outside of our organizations, like nonprofits, government agencies, universities, or even commercial entities to collaborate and co-create around a specific initiative. So these will be what we consider trusted collaborators with domain expertise that you can leverage to build an initiative together. And within ArcGIS Hub Premium, all these parties have identities in your system, work on the same platform, and you can even share content and privileges with them. And you could start to think of them as co-creators and add them to teams and even task them with things you need. And we tend to organize this concept of team and community around what we call initiative, which are essentially projects. And this is made possible through ArcGIS Hub Premium. And Premium includes in the initiative framework that we just mentioned, ability for people outside of your organization to create community identities, ability to form teams, create events, and integrate feedback tools into Hub. And before we move forward into our first demo, I want to briefly discuss on what happens when you create an initiative. And when you create an initiative, new item and groups are added to your organization, just like as James showed. And in addition to the content and core team group that you get from enterprise sites, you also get a separate group for followers, which you see here in purple, as well as a separate group for each event that you add to that initiative. So with that, let's create an initiative and see what happens behind the scenes very quickly. So here I have our organizational portal, and just like enterprise sites, to create the hub, you have to go to the app launcher, click create, and you're able to create a new initiative. But what sets ArcGIS Hub Premium apart from enterprise sites or basic is that you get access to all these different templates. And these templates are really designed to jumpstart your organization's initiatives. And for example, with the recent response to COVID-19, Esri have provided these 3 initiative templates. And it's really easy to create one. I'm going to create one using this business continuity template here. And what's happening behind the scenes is that 3 ArcGIS online groups are being created. One for the core team, the contents, and the followers. And while you're not limited to these groups, these will play a central role in managing your content and permissions for the initiative. So let's take a look at what we've created so far. So we got this nice template to start building out our information. And if we go back to our groups and search for business continuity, you see that just now I created these 3 groups here: the continuity, the content, the core team, and the core team will be responsible for creating, editing, and managing the site, as well as followers, which we didn't see with enterprise sites. And this group will essentially add members of your community who follow the initiative to this group so that we could share specific content with these followers. And we'll show how to configure this and use this group effectively in the coming demo. So now that we have seen what happens when we create an initiative, let's open up an example and extend the initiative with premium features using events, feedback, and followers. So in this example, I have a demo template, and it is already shared with the public. And we'll start by adding events to Hub. And if I scroll down to the bottom here, I have added an upcoming events layout element, which displays all the events that the user can sign up for. And what we'll do is we'll add another event to populate this calendar, as well as highlight that event afterwards. And we could do that by going into the local menu, going to the event. And once we are in here, we're able to see all the events by their status, audience, location, and date range. And we could create a new event by clicking new and event. And while we're given the template to fill out a new event, I'm gonna go ahead and just activate an event that I created earlier called ArcGIS Pro Tips and Tricks. That's actually our next webinar. And you see that it has been populated with a thumbnail as well as other information. So I'm gonna go ahead and reactivate this event and also share it publicly because we want everyone in the open internet to be able to access this content. So with that, we're gonna go back here and confirm that this event has been added to the calendar event, but we're also going to use this feature event layout element to highlight this event that we just added. So we're going to select this event that we activated and click OK. All right, so next let's add a feedback survey. And ArcGIS Hub makes it really easy for the core team, those are the editors who have the permission to add content to the site, to create ArcGIS applications without ever having to leave Hub. And to create applications, I like to go to the content library here. And if you go to the new tab here, you get access to this app. And once you click on that, you see that you get access and the privilege to create your favorite ArcGIS applications like Story Map, Dashboard, and Experience Builder. But because we're trying to create the feedback survey, that feedback survey is actually under feedback here. And it gives you a launch off point to create a survey from scratch. But because this is Hub Premium, we also have access to templates that are included with this initiative. So I'm going to go ahead and activate this survey. And what is great about creating feedback survey or any other application from Hub is that you get to build it right within this interface. So the Survey 123's web designer is built right into the Hub interface, which makes it really intuitive and easy to configure. So as you can see, if you're familiar with Survey 123, that familiar user interface to include new questions, delete and configure the survey is right within here. But I'm just gonna, for the sake of time, I'm just gonna go ahead and publish this survey to see what happens. And what's happening behind the scene is the typical process of creating the feature layer so that we could hold that data. But what's also happening when you create the survey in Hub is that this survey is being shared with the contents group as well as the core teams group that was created when we launched this initiative, which means that this survey is accessible to those individuals. So let's jump back to our organization and just confirm that we have created this survey, and we see that it was created. And we see that in addition to this being private, just to me, it was also shared with the demo core team as well as the demo content. So any individual who are part of the core team or the content will have access to this survey. But because we want to make this a public survey, we're going to go ahead and change this sharing to public and add it to our initiative site. So let me jump back to our initiative site. And about halfway down, I have a part to comment on this project. So using the survey layout element, I'm going to add the survey, click on the survey that I just created, and adjust the look and feel a little bit. And just like that, we've added a public survey. And finally, the last part of the premium capabilities that I want to highlight is adding a follow initiative element. And follow initiative is essentially a call to action to ask the members of the community to become a follower of this initiative. And every great website that has a specific intent has a call to action. And this is a great way of adding that. So I'm going to go ahead and save. And now I'm going to go in as an anonymous user and see what we just created. And we see that the follow button has been added. The survey is also accessible. And as anonymous user, I could click and access the survey. And I also see that we have events here, and I could click in to look at the details. And we could look at the details, but what we'll notice is that if I want to attend, it actually asks me to log in with my community identity, because that will be the only way for us to track who the user is, who signed up for that event. And same thing for followers. If we click, it asks us to sign in. So in the next demo, we'll enable community identities in ArcGIS Hub so that we could create a true two-way engagement platform. But before we jump in, let's quickly review a few other notes in the slides. So what happens when we activate ArcGIS Hub Premium and the community identities? So when you activate ArcGIS Hub Premium, a second organization gets created and gets connected to your primary organization. And this community organization will house the identities for your community members and manage the credits needed to perform their work, like creating applications, storing data, performing analysis. And everything created in the community organization is kept separate from the content that you create in your primary organization. So what can community members do? So they are creators in the community organization. So they can receive private content, contribute to your organization's data, manage events, follow initiative, and even create apps. This is not a full list of what the community members can do. So all you have to remember is that they're essentially creators. They are creators in the community organizations. They could do anything that the creator could do in an organization. So use this as a list to brainstorm ideas of how you want to engage the community. And all you have to remember is that they are creator user types. So again, in the next demo, let's enable a two-way collaboration by involving the community. All right, so for this demo scenario, let's suppose that rather than having a public survey that we see here, we want to have the survey be exposed to community members who are followers of the initiative. So to do that and to demonstrate that, I first need to log in with my community profile. And just to drive home the point that this is indeed a different community identity, I'm going to create this identity right here. So I'm going to use my Google account, and to make it easy to distinguish, call it Sequan Community. I'm going to accept the terms of use, and you're also free to input your own organization's terms of use and hit create account. And just like that, my profile has been created, and I could even add photos and modify details about me. And this is all connected to the ArcGIS Online community organization profile. So let's hit save. So as a community member, now let me refresh this page. Now, as a community member, now you can see that I am able to follow the events, follow the initiative, and also attend the event. And what we want to do is to make sure that this survey here is only accessible to those individuals who are following this initiative. So when a community member follows this initiative, what happens is in the back end, this community member is added to the follower group. So let's check that this has been done. So we have the follower group, and if we go to the members, you see that my community version of me is here. And if I actually jump out, unfollow, and refresh, you see that now I'm removed. So in order to share this content specifically with the follower, what I'll do is go back to the survey that we created, unshare this so that it's private and it's not open to the public, but share it with the follower group that we just visited. So I'm going to change the community or share settings, and we're going to share this with the follower group so that the followers of this initiative has access to the survey. So let's hit OK. So we're going to jump right back in, and I'm going to refresh without following. And I'm not following at the moment, and I see that the survey is not visible. But if I follow and hit refresh, I see that now the survey is visible, and I could access it and submit it just as I would as before. And we can now take this same concept and apply it to pages within ArcGIS Hub. So in this page, in this initiative, I've created 3 sub-pages to represent sort of the personas that are going to visit my site. One for internal employees, one for the community, and one for internal or external collaborators. So I want to make sure this community zone page is accessible by the followers of the initiative. And I could do that by clicking this check button here. So I'm going to click save, jump back out and hit refresh. And what I see that as I'm following, I have access to this community zone page. And if I unfollow, the page disappears. It's a really neat way to configure privileges and content based on sort of different levels of engagements in your community. And now, what if we want to give selected community members a more targeted content that they could access on Hub? And we could do that by creating what we call supporting teams. And here, we could create supporting team by going to the Teams menu item, and we could create a supporting team, and I'm going to name this ArcGIS Hub Demo Collaborators. And when you create a supporting team, you could add anyone from your own primary organization as well as the community. So I'm going to add the community version of me here. And what I'm going to do is jump back out and configure this collaborator zone page so that only the members of the support team that we just created has access. So rather than checking the box here, I'm going to go add others, support team, and add this demo collaborator group. So once I hit save and I jump back out, now I see that the collaborator zone page is now accessible. So now let's take a final step and make a community member a co-creator of the Hub site. So rather than simply accessing content, we can give a community member the full privileges to edit pages, create applications, and curate content on the Hub site. And we could do this by adding that community member into the core team. So let's jump into Teams again, click on core team, and we'll add the community member. And once we do this, and we jump back out to the community member's profile, I see that now I have access to all the pages, as well as this edit icon that gives me full editing privileges to the site. And what's great is that it's not about just adding elements. I could also go and create applications. So once I hit app and hit store map, as a community member, I'm creating applications in this initiative that I could share with the community. And if you recall in the beginning that I've mentioned that when we start up an initiative, that another community organization is created that houses the members as well as the content that the community member creates. And I want to just show you where that is and just confirm that that is happening. So going into the global menu, hitting on settings, you have a link here to access your community organization. And in the community organization, you actually have another community administrator account here, which you create when you configure ArcGIS Hub Premium. And you see that this is a separate organization with its separate credits and so on. And we can see that when we go to members, there's a community version of me here. And when we go to the contents, the story map that I just created resides within this community. So I hope that through this demonstration, you have a better feel for how you can leverage the premium capabilities in ArcGIS Pro or ArcGIS Hub to create an engagement platform for your community. So let's jump back into our presentation and wrap up. So next is tips and tricks just to really enhance your hub or sites. And the first tips and tricks is to hook up Google Analytics to your hub. And you can find this under settings and domain. And this will give you an idea of what data set and pages are most popular, where the traffic is coming from, and who the audience is. And if you have experience using Google Analytics, Google Analytics allows you to set custom defined goals, which are actions that are considered important on your site. So this could be anything from a site visit or a data set download or submitting a survey and etc. So ultimately that insight from Google Analytics is going to help you to make adjustment to your site to make it more effective. So next tip is about automating and integrating to streamline your community management. First is to have an invitation process using Survey 123. Second is automating the management of users in your community. So if the user has been inactive for a long time, you could automate the removal of these accounts using Python API. And finally, you could set active sync where content created by your community members can be synced to your primary organization. And this is an example of the first idea of creating a vetting process using Survey 123. And when a user is approved based on this survey, they will get an invitation to join the community. The last tips and tricks is something that James also touched upon, and it's about maintaining a consistent brand identity across your digital assets. So ArcGIS Enterprise and Sites and Hub is about exposing your GIS content to non-GIS users. So whenever your stakeholder visits Sites or Hub, they really shouldn't notice anything different from what they're already used to. So you could leverage the HTML and CSS custom option within Hub and Sites to really brand your header and the menu. And there's a lot that you could do with that custom HTML and CSS. And finally, to wrap up, I just want to highlight a few resources. The first is a gallery of great hub sites that our team curates, and you could access it in the link as you see on the page. And there's a great way of getting started with building your first site or hub is to look at great examples, and this page will give you access to that. Second is a hands-on training lessons to get you started with the different capabilities in Sites and Hub, and there are two learning paths at learnarcgis.com, and you get to go step by step and really explore the different capabilities in Hub Basic as well as Hub Premium. And finally, you could access great resources in the Hub overview page, and there are a few links down there where you could access our GeoNet community, where our product teams and the community can communicate with each other to provide feedback on next iteration of the tools that we develop. So with that, on behalf of James and the rest of the national government team, just want to thank you for joining us this afternoon, and we'll open up the floor for questions. Thank you very much.
Thanks, James and Calvin. Actually, Brian and Armando have done a great job of answering questions as they've come in. But I did want to highlight one question that a user had. And they were asking for some best practices for determining when to post maps and apps onto the main page versus creating a nested page, as seen with the pirate page in the demo.
James, would you like to take that, or should I take a crack at it?
Yeah, absolutely. As Brian answered in the chat, that's really going to be up to you. So part of the planning exercise I was describing was, thinking about what's the purpose for your site, why you want people to go there for information and what information you're trying to put in front of them. So as Brian said in his answer, you don't want to overload that initial site page with, too many maps and apps and everything. Otherwise, that information become lost. So you want to think about kind of logical buckets of information that you can put those apps on, and that'll help drive kind of your site map. So for my example, that's why I wanted to put kind of my main, I guess, friendly, maritime information on my main site around those different apps or services from Spire or Hawkeye 360, and then kind of move anything other, in that case, the piracy map or app onto that separate page.
Great. Thanks again, James and Calvin, and Brian and Armando for answering questions in the chat. We will be sending out the recording and the slides once the recording is available. We'll also send out some of the information on Bootstrap and some of the other links that we discussed as well. So thanks everyone for attending, and have a good rest of your day.